Welcome. Welcome today at our webinar, Achieving Cost-Effective Decarbonization, Target and Measures to Unlock Distributed Flexibility. I'm Michael Villa. I'm the Executive Director of smartEn, Smart Energy Europe, and today's webinar is organized together with the smartEn in the context of the Industry Days. Let me allow to briefly present in the next slide smartEn. smartEn is a European business organization which is gathering around 60 companies integrating the consumer-driven solutions of the clean energy transition. They are offering on the market smart technologies and data-driven energy services in order to help unlock and unleash the demand stability potential. Today's event that you can see in the next slide is aiming at promoting a publication realized by smartEn and supported by the smartEn, which has the same title of today's webinar, indeed, Achieving Cost-Effective Decarbonization, Target and Measures to Unlock Distributed Flexibility, that you can find on our website, smarten.eu, where you can find more details of the content that will be presented today during today's webinar. Let me briefly introduce the agenda in the next slide. I will indeed start with a brief introduction of the ingredients for an activation of demand stability. And then I will give the floor to some colleagues, to some smartEn members, to specifically address the policy measures that we believe are needed to reward the active participation and the promotion of prosumer business models. And then we will have a question and answer sessions, also with a pool to engage with the audience. I see that there are some problems with the slides. They are not changing. So yes, I think that there is an issue that we might be able to solve soon. Voila. Let's maybe let's go to the previous slide to just give a very brief overview of the agenda that I presented today. Indeed, it's going to be quite a concise webinar, 45 minutes, where we are going to provide as much information as possible, but also really happy to reply to your questions in the question and answer sections that we will have at the end of our presentation. So as it was presented in the showcase shown in the slides that appeared before, we have some very simple house rules. The first one is that you can submit questions through the question and answer box on the dashboard on the right side of your screen. You're warmly invited to reply to polls, and also you can react to our intervention with the MOI function on the that you can find on the dashboard. I still see that slides are not moving. I would suggest to project slide number 6 to be sure that everyone is aligned and have in front the 4 ingredients that smartEn believes are extremely important to activate the demand flexibility. Is slide number 6. I think that there are still some issues. Well, it will appear, but in order not to lose time, I will introduce indeed the fact that in order to activate demand stability, we need first to eliminate regulatory barriers. This can be done through the implementation of the electricity market design, which is a European policy framework composed of a European directive and European regulation that should be implemented in all member states of the European Union. Another element is to complement provisions of the electricity market design with a specific and dedicated network code for demand flexibility. Another extremely important element to indeed unleash the activation of demand flexibility is to keep deploying and integrating decentralized energy resources in buildings, in industry, from electric vehicles in the network, in the electricity networks where they are part of. And then fourth element is to develop revenue streams and promote business models to indeed reward the active participation of all end users to the clean energy transition. In my presentation, I will focus on the first element, so the elimination of the regulatory barriers, and then my colleagues instead will investigate and will provide more insights on our recommendation on policy measures to reward the active participants to the clean energy transition. So in the next slide, well, actually slide number 8, we can see the results of another publication that smartEn realized in November 2020, which was a mapping of how some member states of the European Union are implementing and transposing the electricity directive and electricity regulation, which was also further complementing and developed more recently in March of this year, jointly with Delta E. The outcome of this monitoring of the elimination of the regulatory barrier existing at member state level can be clustered in 4 groups. The first one refers to market-based procurement of all decentralized energy resources by system operators. From this assessment, from this monitoring assessment, we see that still there are several barriers. In particular, no national framework has been set to fully incentivize and accurately remunerate DSOs to procure flexibility. It's a bit more advanced, this market-based procurement of all decentralized energy resources by TSO, notably for ancillary services. With regard to the second cluster, and I would really appreciate to have slide number 8 so that you can also have a figurative understanding of our mapping. We have looked at provisions at European level that help the non-discriminatory participation of all decentralized energy resources to all markets and mechanisms, and see how they were indeed transposed at national levels. We can say that with regard to day-ahead and intraday markets, the situation is more advanced, in particular in countries like France, Finland, Italy, Romania, and Slovenia, which comply with this non-discriminatory participation requirement. However, there are still some limitations, a strong limitation in countries like Greece, Ireland, and Spain. All of them, and we have a minimum bid size that is around 1 megawatt, which is the double that the provision that is set at European level, which is indeed a major limitation. And also aggregation services has a strong limitation in countries like Germany and the UK. With regard to the balancing markets, well, there are strong limitations. In countries like Spain and Italy, only generation units can participate. And in the UK, we cannot even describe them as real balancing markets because bids and offers are actually accepted by the TSO at its own discretions. The last, a third cluster refers to frameworks for innovative services. Still, no major provision have been adopted that, in particular with regard to demand response aggregation frameworks at national levels, with the exception of France. Also, the double network charges for active customers owning an energy storage facility is still present in most of the countries. Only France and Spain have eliminated these major barriers. And with regard to the last cluster of provisions that would help indeed activate the demand subsidiarity, which refers to indeed access to price signal for end users. Well, dynamic electricity price contracts are a reality in some countries, notably in Finland, Italy, Spain, and the UK. Of course, this is related to the deployment of smart meters, but still a lot more needs to be done in that sense. I still see that slide number 8 cannot be displayed, which is a pity, but indeed you can find our monitoring report on our website, smarten.eu, where you can find all this information on the regulatory frameworks to eliminate barriers for demand subsidiarity and progress in that sense. And now on slide 10, that aims to introduce indeed the policy measures that we believe are essential to reward the active participants and promote prosumer business models. And we will focus on 4 of them. The first one are minimum a minimum target for demand subsidiarity that should be set at national level. The second one are dedicated products to be set also at national level to boost demand subsidiarity. And then a recommendation to expand the white certificates or the energy efficiency obligation schemes to really valorize system efficiency, and last but not least, introduce reliability options. All these 4 policy measures will be introduced by my colleagues and members, and I would like to give the floor to Daniele, who should, from Enel X, Daniele Andreoli, Head of Flexibility Solution from Enel X, who should present our first recommendation on a national target for demand subsidiarity. Daniele, you have the floor. And hopefully your slide will be then also appear.
Let's see. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Hello. Good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and to share our perspective on how targets can help boosting demand side flexibility in Europe. So probably we can start with a few slides just to comment on that. Clearly, we know that Europe has a very ambitious target on decarbonization, and that we are trying to achieve it mostly also switching the energy mix to produce electricity from being very exposed to conventional resources to renewable resources. It's a great opportunity to decarbonize. At the same time, we know that having a renewable energy mix it exposes us to challenges in managing the grid by TSO. So clearly, we should imagine that new players, new actors, as demand side flexibility aggregators, should be allowed in every country to participate to this market. So in a study like this one that in the next slide we can see that was done by Delta E and smartEn. Every country in Europe should have been at the same place. So this map should be colored dark orange, but instead it is not. The reality, unfortunately, and we are living also with our experience in most of these markets in Europe, is that we can manage demand response in some countries in a very good way, but in others we have difficulties and barriers. That's a pity, but that's the reality, and we need to acknowledge it. Unfortunately, although member states have the obligation to remove barriers, not to discriminate, and to open up every market to demand response and demand-side flexibility, the reality it's like this one that we are seeing here. In some countries it is true, in some others it is not. So in some countries it happens like regulators are marking some checkbox saying that let's say on paper everything is open, but the reality, unfortunately, is that still remains some practical barriers in order to really participate with these resources to the market, providing important services that the grid needs, we believe. So what about turning completely, changing completely the game and introducing binding targets? In this way, we believe that then regulators should focus on the outcomes, not just on the processes, to build something that on paper it works, but then on reality it doesn't. So if they have indeed targets, then they need to be measured against those targets, and they need to make it happen. That's clear. So that's why I believe that introducing this one should completely change and give the opportunity to demand-side response to really develop in the way that it should do. So then if we acknowledge that binding targets should be introduced, then the next question, and we can move also to the next chart, is okay, but what should be the target? If we imagine a very low target, then it's ineffective. On the contrary side, if we put a very ambitious, very high level target, then probably member states will be forced to even spend too much in trying to exploit these resources. So we can take an example from US. Probably you're more accustomed to EU, so I tried to just look into another part of the world in which you know that demand response was introduced a lot of time ago in US, and so far, very recently, you can see this in some countries, demand response has a penetration around 6% of the peak load. Historically, it reached even up to 7 or 8% in some of these markets of the total peak load. So since this was reached, and it is reached also nowadays, mostly predominantly with C&I customers, so just commercial industrial customers, we may think that enlarging this market also with new actors, new source of flexibility like residentials, electric vehicles, batteries, etc., and also moving towards electrification of transport and other sectors. Clearly, the target should be more ambitious than what we see nowadays. So probably a 10% target, binding target, should be the right one. And to conclude, and moving to the last chart, we can say that there is no downside to demand-side flexibility. It creates value for multiple stakeholders. It has multiple benefits. We are studying also with the help of a consulting how demand-side flexibility can help to decarbonize, and even we are seeing that for every megawatt of new demand-side flexibility, the grid can accommodate a much higher number of renewable energies. So it has a multiplier effect on the fact that we can accommodate more and more renewable thanks to demand side flexibility. So I really don't see any downside, but now since we need to concentrate in making it happen, if we do believe that the right path is decarbonization, then we need to give instruments to the TSOs in order to manage this new environment. So also in a way that is economically convenient. So definitely introducing binding targets will help us in moving in the right way. And also I'm sure that putting the accent on this and having binding targets will push also the effort on regulatory bodies that their work will be noted, will be judged, and so they need to make it happen. A lot more you can find also on the publication, the study, the position paper that smartEn realized. And thanks for your attention. That was what I wanted to share with you today. Michael.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Daniele. We will indeed have time to reply to some of the questions that indeed we are receiving in the dedicated question and answer session. But now I would like to give the floor to the second speaker, which is Jan Zacharias, Manager Regulatory Affairs for Entelios, who is going to present us the dedicated products policy measures.
Thanks a lot, Mika. Thanks a lot to Daniele, who presented that the binding targets at national level or at EU level are necessary. And I'm happy that the slides work now fine. So I'd like to give a brief impulse, so just some experience with a dedicated product from Germany. On the next slide, you can really see it works fine, thanks. You can see some experience with an interruptible load scheme in Germany. We have this scheme that started 2013, and we already have the second version of it. So there are weekly tenders at the moment with 1.5 gigawatts of interruptible loads divided into two parts, so 750 megawatts of interruptible loads that can shut down within a third of a second, and the other 750 megawatts that shut down within 15 minutes. And industries that offer this service get up to a maximum of 500 euro per megawatt per week for a capacity price. And in the situation of activation, they get some activation price. Our experience is that this instrument in Germany works quite well, and we had some increase in the situation and in the, let's say, in the options how to participate. So in the past, up to 2017, there were monthly tenders, and now we have weekly tenders. Also, the minimum bid size decreased to only 5 megawatts for participation, and the number of participants increased within the last years. So up to now, we have even more than 17 participants. Offer volume also increased, and we have more and more options that are possible for participation at the moment. And our experience in Germany is, you can see it here on the right side in this kind of table, that even within the last years, number of activations, number of activated capacity, the amount of activated energy, and also the time period of activation, all of these figures increased a lot. So this instrument is used much more now than in the past. And on the next slide, you can see really that our main lessons learned with this dedicated product for demand side flexibility. So I already explained that the instrument is used more and more. Up to now, 375 activations that we had, that the TSOs activated in industries to shut down. The last activation was last week. And we can say that this dedicated product in Germany prevented blackout situations on the one side, in 2018 and 2019 and even up to this period now. And another lessons learned is that the potential of flexibility is even higher than we thought at the beginning, than the industry imagined at the beginning, because once we learn how industry works and how the processes work one with the other, and the different branches, the different industries, paper industry, chemical industry, etc., identify more and more potential to include into these tenders. So one lesson learned, or one additional lesson learned that is very interesting for us, is that this instrument makes a market entry for the industry. So the industry did not participate in any flexibility scheme at the beginning, and with this scheme, they can really participate in the energy transition. They can, the industry and the renewables can go more hand in hand, and this instrument helps the industry to cope well with the procurement of renewables. And the last point, what we also learned, one thing that is not really possible, the intraday trading or intraday market is not really compatible with industry and on this whole, because we have wrong price signals on the one side in the intraday market, and we have wrong time intervals in the intraday market. And this is why we need a dedicated product. I will make this with the example here. You see a graph with a load profile of a paper production. And you see the load profile. This is the blue graph. On the one side, going down for some hours. It's a 3-hour block between 8, 15 and 11 during a day. And there's an interruption interval starting at 8:22. So this is a rectangular graph. That is the interruption from the TSO. The TSO wants an interruption from 8:37 to 9:37 for 60 minutes. And this TSO informs us 15 minutes before at 8:22. And you see with this yellow block, within these 15 minutes, the industry consumption goes down, and 15 minutes is okay. Then we have 16 minutes of interruption, which works quite well. And then the interruption activation signal stops from the TSO, but the industry cannot restart again that easily within 15 minutes, but needs a longer time, 60 minutes maybe, and maybe a bit more. And this is why intraday market price signals that work for 15 minutes periods, they do not cope well. They are incompatible with this product, and interruptible loads are not generation. They do not work the same. So this is the reason why we need a dedicated product on a European level. And I'd like to say that this year's revision of the Energy Environmental State Aid Guideline should include these dedicated products, because in Germany, we have very positive experience with it, only that this product in Germany is limited until mid of next year, and there should be a continuation in the future. This is the input and the lessons learned that we have made in Germany. Thanks a lot, and back to Michael.
Thanks a lot, Jan, for sharing in particular concrete examples from the German experience of interruptible loads. I would inform everyone that indeed, apparently, the technical details have been solved. We will share the slides after the event, and of course, you can contact us if you have some follow-up questions. I'm now happy to give the floor to my colleague, Marion Malafos, Policy Manager at smartEn, who is going to present our recommendation on the white certificates or the energy savings obligation schemes.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning to everyone. So indeed, another additional opportunity that we see to reflect the value of demand-side flexibility and its contribution to system efficiency is through white certificates. So in the current framework, so more specifically the Energy Efficiency Directive, member states have the obligation to achieve annual energy savings in the end-use consumption. So the member states, they have the possibility to fulfill these obligations by setting up energy efficiency obligation schemes, where you have obligated party, usually energy suppliers, who will implement and achieve those energy savings. This is targeting end-use consumption, so it is expected to encourage greater effort in key sectors such as building, public, residential, commercial, but also in industry and transport. I think we have lost the slides currently, but it should be back soon. So the obligated party, the suppliers, they can also delegate these obligations to energy service providers who would achieve the energy efficiency obligation for them on their behalf. And then that would allow those energy suppliers then to take into account those energy savings. So currently in the EU framework, there is an obligation on energy suppliers to achieve 0.8% savings per year among their clients through energy efficiency improvements. The list of energy efficiency actions is defined at member states level, and it can be about informing customers on where they have energy saving potentials, running dedicated programs, or even incentives to customers. Once the energy savings are achieved and this target is reached, a white certificate is then attributed to obligated parties. So the supplier or the energy service providers who will then sell this white certificate to the energy suppliers. You have such schemes in France, in Italy, in Poland, where you have the trading of white certificate that is being allowed. There are many benefits to such approach. The Commission has assessed itself that these measures of white certificates and energy efficiency obligation schemes are a cost-efficient instrument for countries who have chosen to implement it. With these white certificates that are tradable, you can have a cost optimization to achieve energy savings, to really target where it is best. And then you're allowed to trade also this white certificate. So this will provide price signals to market actors. It opens energy saving markets as well to third parties, and it gives a value to to energy savings. However, the savings that are achieved in these schemes are static energy savings, meaning that it does not value the role that demand-side flexibility can play to the system. So it only looks at savings at the individual level, at the end user premises, but not what are the benefits in terms of efficiency and savings at the system level. And in the next slide, we can see also what we are also pushing for, because in smartEn, we value the potential of these efficiency schemes as they exist, but we see them as an opportunity to really support energy efficiency at system level. And to do that, we need to expand the current scope to take into account the benefit of demand-side flexibility. So white certificates should then be allowed to reward demand-side flexibility when it's delivered at relevant moment for the system. So the objective there is really to move from a static approach to energy savings to a more dynamic approach to savings, which value and promote the savings that are achieved from flexible electricity consumption. So we need a dynamic concept of energy efficiency that is time-dependent, meaning when the system needs it the most. So, for example, if you have an air conditioner, air ecosystem that is efficient and that runs in the afternoon when solar electricity is abundant, then you will have also CO2 reduction impact and savings that are greater than an efficient cooker that runs at peak time, when coal plants are at maximum output. So by being able to adjust when the system needs it the most, then you can also achieve greater CO2 reduction. So with those white certificates that valorize demand-side flexibility, you can really valorize the impacts at system level. So this approach means counting not only energy savings, but also shiftings, which are calculated as well in megawatt hours. So the shifting of energy among end users due to the activation of the demand-side flexibility. And this is an important thing that needs to be rewarded. So if you have an occupant in a building that can switch off his heating system in a moment of peak demand, that will save energy while supporting the system, the decarbonization of the system as well. So that should be valorized. The same for an industry that can keep producing its goods, but would shift its consumption at a specific given time. So this dynamic approach, as we see it, would support both implicit flexibility and explicit flexibility. So for implicit flexibility, so it's flexibility in response to external signals, price, but also you could also take into account CO2 signals. So you would be able to achieve savings, for instance, thanks to a dynamic price contract, and then you would be rewarded for the savings that you achieved through that. So in that case, the obligated party would receive white certificates if their customers flexible loads enable to have a certain amount of savings or shiftings per year. And this will also be an additional support for the uptake of dynamic price contract. There is also the explicit flexibility, so the one supported by market incentives, where you have aggregators playing a role, and their aggregators should also be entitled to receive white certificates based on the distributed electricity that they can of their clients that they can deliver, activate at relevant moment. And then the suppliers would be purchasing these certificates from aggregators to fulfill their annual obligations. So that would also mean an additional revenue streams for prosumers and for prosumer business models. So in a nutshell, this dynamic approach has multifold benefits. In addition to energy savings at individual level, it brings energy savings at system level. It supports the activation of end users, so allowing customers to play a more active role by unlocking the flexibility potentials. It supports the integration of more renewables in a cost-effective way in the system. And it also contributes to relieve stress to the system, and it could also contribute to avoid investment in infrastructure reinforcement or expansion, so be it grid or backup generation. So overall, we see these white certificates for system efficiency that valorize demand-side flexibility having a great potential for cost-effective decarbonization. And that is an additional measures to overcome also the missing money problems for unlocking distributed flexibility and support consumer business models. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Marion, for this recommendation how to expand the current white certificates in view indeed of dynamic efficiency improvement that indeed valorize demand flexibility activation. Indeed, we have some questions for you that will be indeed addressed later on in the question and answer session. And now it's the turn of Stephen Woodhouse, Director of AFRY Management Consulting, who is going to introduce as the reliability option.
Thank you, Mika. So Stephen Woodhouse speaking from AFRY. I've been working on subjects relating to the disruption of the energy markets for what feels like most of my career. I came in to an organization called AFRY, which is now Ofgem, taking out the old centralized pool and moving towards a new decentralized set of arrangements. And decentralization is one of the big topics as we move towards the decarbonization of the power system. So if we could move to the next slide, please. We put out a paper, I think I presented this at the Florence Forum in 2015, so it's not a new idea. It's actually not a completely original idea either. Reliability options have been in force in the centralized form since 2006 in Colombia, and they're now in place in New England, in Italy, and we were instrumental in introducing the centralized version of a reliability option into the Irish power market, the single electricity market. But if we could have the next slide, please. The introduction of renewables to become the dominant, one more forward, please. The introduction of renewables to become the dominant form of generation brings three challenges in the way we look at it. Firstly, locational issues. Secondly, operational flexibility challenges, but then thirdly, investment challenges. And again, one step forward, please. Now, the flexibility challenge is especially interesting because we see both the demand for flexibility going up as we electrify new types of load, which might have peak capacity requirements, and also as we introduce new forms of generation to the mix, which are weather dependent. But we are also squeezing out the conventional plants from the mix, which traditionally provide the flexibility and stability services. And we're also seeing new actors needing flexibility, including distribution companies, to avoid network investment. So flexibility becomes very, very interesting as we step forward. And next step, please. And I personally am very dubious about the idea that you can simply create standardized products. We need the degree of flexibility we need, the activation time, the duration. These are all variables, not fixed parameters. We have standard products for ancillary services, and they are in old money called primary, secondary, and tertiary reserve. They're now called FCR, replacement reserve, and FRR in the middle. But those are standard products that steam turbines can do. They're not really targeted at the types of flexibility we need in the future. So I'm a little cautious that standard products give you old-fashioned supply-side solutions and don't fully embrace the diverse nature of the demand side. So we need market incentives for investment, yes. And in the world of price and volume volatility, it becomes harder and harder to make investments purely on the movements of the spot prices alone, and the forward price market. The forward markets aren't really covering the right risks. So if just one more forward, please. But what we need is incentives for investment in the right types of flexibility. And that doesn't just mean supply side technology like generation and batteries. It also very much means investment in demand side technology. I have an EV charger at my home, and I think it is totally mad that I was not offered the opportunity for a flexible connection. I'm given firm access for my EV charger, and it definitely doesn't need firm access. So if we could move to the next slide, please. This was a solution that we proposed a number of years ago for the conundrum that we need investment, but we need to be able to reward flexibility in different ways. And the degrees of flexibility that we need are different in different systems. So if you look at the typical capacity payment mechanism, we introduced a bog standard one in Britain a few years ago. It included a parameter that said you need to be flexible with 4 hours warning. And I've been on record for many years as saying, but when the lights go out in Britain, we won't get 4 hours warning of the incident that caused it. And of course, the lights went out in Britain in 2019, August, and we didn't get 4 hours warning of the lightning strike that caused it. And I don't want to get into the debate about exactly why that happened. But the point is that we don't just need megawatts. We need megawatts that are capable of responding to the flexibility needs of the system at the time. And those flexibility needs will change. Now, I was intrigued by the concept of a reliability option, which is in place in a number of markets. But the problem is, like all of the centralized marketplaces, it's one product, one time frame. So all of the megawatts have the same characteristics. So the concept of a reliability option is that it's effectively a combination of a physical commitment and a commercial option. So when the spot price goes above a certain level, the seller of the reliability option has to give back some money to whatever the strike price is in the option. But the problem with that is, if we want our power market to migrate towards one where we trade options, not all options have the same characteristics. They have different strike prices, but they also have different degrees of flexibility. So we've worked very hard to move our power markets to have continuous trading and trading over a range of time frames from forward to day ahead, right the way up to balancing and real time. We need our capacity and flexibility instruments to reflect that same time dimension. So we proposed a model called a decentralized reliability option. So in this model, buyers and sellers negotiate for the type of flexibility they need. So there's like in France, in the centralized capacity mechanism, an obligation is placed on retailers to procure flexibility on behalf of their customers. But how they do it and when they do it is up to them. And the degrees of freedom, so they're obliged to procure some capacity, but then we set up some standardized products which allow them to choose between the level of the strike price, but also the market against which the option is called, whether it's close to real time, 1 hour ahead, 2 hours ahead, 4 hours ahead. So a provider with not much flexibility just has capacity to sell. A provider with much more real-time flexibility has a more valuable product to sell. And a buyer who gets quite good certainty of their needs, day ahead, can buy a cheap option. A buyer who has a lot of uncertainty right up until close to real time needs to pay for a premium for the flexibility. So the concept is that you choose the product that you need and you embed different types of flexibility into the same contractual framework. So by decentralizing, you get some efficiency gains, you get proper incentives for investment for different types of flexibility rather than the one size fits all we see in capacity mechanisms usually. The demand side, because it's a centralized scheme, can be included either implicitly or explicitly. So if, like in France, the retailer chooses not to buy capacity in advance, they then have to get their demand reduced to reduce their obligation close to real time. So it incorporates both demand and supply side, both implicit and explicit demand flexibility. The downside is you don't get the liquidity clustering around a single product. So we will have to manage the way that we define the products in this. But in principle, it opens up the flexibility investment options to a much greater range of flexibility capabilities. So I'll stop at that point. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stephen, for this presentation on reliability option. We are running late, so we have time for one question for each speaker, and I will start indeed with Daniele. A question to you on the targets. A participant is asking, should the binding target differentiate between demand response, behind the meter generation, and storage?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I believe that in reality, no. It should be a unique binding target for flexibility. Then it doesn't matter, I think, which will be the source of flexibility. It's important that we arrive to that level, and then the aggregators will provide the resources that they can bring to the market.
Thanks a lot. Jan, another question to you. Is the instrument, the interoperability schemes, open to all industries? And what experience do you have with different industries that you have worked with?
It's a good question. No, unfortunately not. The example I presented for Germany with 1.5 gigawatts, it's open only for 3 industries. It's open for aluminium industry, paper and chemical industry. And the whole steel industry is missing, the whole cement industry is missing, etc. So our experience is looking at France or Italy, for example, where TSOs can shut down steel industry. There should be instruments open for more industries in Europe. And this dedicated product should be opened much more. The potential is still not used.
Thanks a lot, Jan. And to Marion, do you consider wide certificates an efficient measure to support system integration?
Yes, indeed. I think this is also a key element there, because if it looks through the white certificate that valorize demand-side flexibility, you also improve system efficiency and you also contribute to the activation of demand-side flexibility from end-use sectors. So you have a lot of potentials in buildings, in transport sectors. So by allowing those sectors to contribute to the system, you really make sure that they become flexible assets of the energy system. So really it contributes to the system efficiency. That's not the only tool, but that's one of the useful tools to achieve that. Definitely.
Thanks, Marion. And Stephen, has the reliability option been implemented? And if not, why not?
Well, the central version of it has been implemented in Colombia and New England. A kind of nuanced version of it has been implemented both in Italy and Ireland, where the reference market is kind of a blended market of the different time frames, but it's still a centralized option. The decentralized version, I think, goes a step further. It's a little bit like the difference between the British capacity mechanism and the French capacity mechanism, which puts a lot more control in the hands of the suppliers. So it hasn't been implemented anywhere. It does need a robust market, a mature market with many buyers and sellers. So it perhaps wasn't appropriate for Ireland at the time that we were designing the single electricity market, but I think it could very well work in the more mature markets, in continental Europe or in the Nordics. It's kind of it's intended as an enhancement to the energy only market, putting the focus on the spot price. So instead of killing the price spikes and having a capacity mechanism, you're not topping up the revenue from the energy market, you're setting an option market around it, and you still need to enhance the signals within the energy market. So you need a properly functioning balancing mechanism, the ability for really sharp price formation, and the existence of these reliability options then allows the customers effectively to have insurance against price spikes. But it does need to work in a market where we can allow the prices to move freely in a very heavily a market with not enough competition, then the ability to allow that to happen is restricted. So it needs a mature market with multiple buyers and sellers.
Thanks a lot to all our speakers. Let's engage with the audience with a very quick and last survey. Indeed, we proposed 4 policy options. Which one do you think is the most effective? And indeed, I would like to ask you to quickly reply to this survey. Hopefully, indeed, you have the possibility to click on some option on these 4 options. Is it the case?
It's in the poll.
Yeah, you need to look at the 3rd column on your right. And we have indeed the targets, the dedicated products, the white certificates for system efficiency, and the reliability options, the 4 ones that were presented today. Let's give a few seconds to reply, and then you can indeed submit vote. I cannot see how many are participating, but maybe it's better to close now.
It says 15 votes.
And the results, we can see them here. Well, while they're going to appear, I would like to encourage once again to go on our website, check the publication where we are providing more details on this policy recommendation that we are currently pushing at European level to be integrated in the Fit for 55 package that has been presented by the European Commission last week on the 14th of July. But all of these policy measures can be also be currently implemented at national level by innovative member states that want to anticipate these European frameworks. So indeed, there is a lot of innovative ideas that should be developed, and we are open to have any kind of cooperation with European and national policymakers and market players that want to investigate and know more about these policymakers to activate demand side stability. I cannot see the results of the poll. Well, yes, no, I see that 50% are in favor of the targets, 26% for the second, which were indeed the interoperability, the dedicated products, and then 21% for the white certificates for system efficiency, and 5% for durability options. Thanks a lot for your participation. Thanks a lot to all the speakers. Once again, please get in touch with us if you want to know more about smartEn and the policy recommendation that we shaped to achieve a cost-effective decarbonization. Thanks a lot, and I wish you a very nice day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.